Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. Early morning sunlight poured into the bedroom through the curtains, and Jessica slowly opened her eyes to the familiar aroma of coffee wafting in from downstairs. It was a thunderous morning ritual since she and William had been married. He always made a pot of aromatic coffee before she woke up. This subtle thoughtfulness, which had once touched her to the core, was now nothing more than habitual blandness. Jessica lay back on her bed and stretched, her mind already working out the day's arrangements. She got out of bed gently, moving as if she were avoiding disturbing something. As she changed, her thoughts drifted, mechanically checking off the day's to-do list in her mind, but deliberately avoiding that all-important appointment deep inside. The table was set with a simple breakfast: omelette, toast, and cut-up fruit. The very moment Jessica puts her plate on the table, William appears in the doorway. His tie was slightly askew, and a gentle smile hung at the corners of his mouth. He came over and dropped a kiss on her cheek, lingering a little longer than usual. "Happy anniversary, honey." William's voice held the kind of warmth that used to make her heart race. "Happy wedding anniversary." "I'm sorry," Jessica responded mechanically, her voice brisk but somewhat perfunctory. She forced herself to smile, but her thoughts had long since drifted elsewhere. William pulled out his chair and sat down, not noticing the ripples within his wife's mind. He started talking about the day's arrangements. He had dinner reservations at Le Bistro and couldn't wait to see her in the new dress he'd bought. Jessica nodded in agreement, responding with just the right amount of enthusiasm, but her mind was on Michael. Michael is a new co-worker who joined her company a year ago. He brings a presence that's impossible to ignore: charming, confident, and slightly flippant, in contrast to William's kind of steady dependability. At first, it was just some harmless flirting, a little spice in a boring job. But as time goes on, the ambiguity between them becomes more obvious and the physical contact becomes more deliberate. Jessica finds herself overwhelmed by Michael's attraction, a stirring she hasn't experienced in years that both excites and terrifies her. Jessica's cell phone vibrated as she gathered her breakfast dishes. It was a message from Michael: "Tonight at 7 p.m. at my apartment. Can't wait to see you." With a quick glance behind her to make sure William hadn't noticed, she then replied, "Okay, I'll see you then." William packed up and got ready to leave the house, stopping at the door and looking back at her fondly. "Don't get too tired today. I want you all to myself tonight." "I don't know," he said with a smile. "I won't." "I'm sorry," Jessica coped with another forced smile. William placed a soft kiss on her lips, a gesture that had once made her heart blossom, but now only made her feel more and more guilty. The house falls into silence after William leaves. Jessica stood in the center of the kitchen, staring at where William had just stood. She knew exactly how wrong she was about to do, something that would betray the 26 years of marriage they had built together. But the desire for Michael drew her like a magnet, a force she couldn't resist. The guilt finally peaked around noon. Jessica picked up her cell phone and sent William a message, and the lie exited so easily: "Honey, there's a sudden emergency at the office, and I might be late to the restaurant. If it's too late, you don't have to wait for me. I promise I'll make it up to you." William's reply came almost immediately: "It's okay, honey. We'll celebrate when you get home. Love you." The sincerity in his words pierced her heart like a sharp blade. For a moment, Jessica contemplated whether or not to cancel her date with Michael and enjoy the anniversary as William had so carefully planned. But the thought of spending the night in that suffocating routine of marriage brought that trapped feeling flooding back. The clock points to 5 o'clock and Jessica changes into the dress William picked out for her. It was an elegantly subtle dress that might have made her feel special on any other occasion, but at the moment it was like a costume, as if to prepare her for the betrayal she was about to stage. She stood in front of the mirror and stared at the woman in it who was about to make a choice that would change everything. Those eyes filled with a complex mixture of anticipation and fear. Taking one last look around the house, Jessica grabbed her handbag and car keys. Instead of heading toward the restaurant where her husband waited eagerly, she drove to Michael's apartment, where a different kind of excitement awaited her. As she drove away, the guilt that had been tormenting her dissipated and was replaced by a heady sense of anticipation. She told herself that for one night, she could have it all: passion, adventure, and that thrilling sense of escape from the everyday. though deep down, she knew full well that this decision would eventually have irreversible consequences. As Jessica drove up to Michael's apartment, the excitement inside her could barely be contained. The neon lights of the city blurred into a blur before her eyes, her thoughts more hurried than the traffic. She kept telling herself that it was just one night, a brief transgression, a brief escape from everyday life. That voice that usually kept her rational was now drowned out by the intoxicating pleasure of what was about to happen. When she arrived, Michael was standing in the doorway waiting for her, a bottle of red wine in his hand and that evil smile that she couldn't resist hanging at the corners of his mouth. "You look gorgeous," he said as his gaze ran over her with reckless abandon, pulling her through the door. Jessica felt a warmth rush to her cheeks, a naked compliment that had become rare in her married life. The apartment was dimly lit, and the air was filled with the scent of candles and a heady musky odor that made her feel a little dizzy. Michael poured them each a glass of expensive red wine, a luxury Jessica rarely enjoyed. As they clinked glasses, she noticed his eyes darting over hers, which contained the silent promise of everything that was going to happen tonight. They start with simple pleasantries and gradually find a surprisingly natural rhythm. Michael had a special sense of humor that always made her laugh. They chatted about work, talked about coworkers, and poked fun at the absurdity of office politics. It all seemed so easy and natural, a conversation that had long since disappeared from her life. A steady stream of red wine poured into the glass, gradually removing the last of Jessica's defenses. They moved from the kitchen to the living room, where Michael put on some music with a light and free rhythm that made her feel as if she were much younger. He took her hand and led her in a dance. It wasn't so much a graceful dance, more of a laughing and twirling around, stumbling and tripping over each other's feet, and finally both collapsing on the couch, laughing like two carefree children. In this moment, Jessica forgot everything. She is no longer a wife, no longer a mother, and no longer a working professional. She was just a woman, reveling in the heart-pounding night. Michael's hands were on her waist, his breath brushed her ear, and everything was mesmerizing, at once strange and inexplicably familiar. As the night wore on, the joking flirtation between them gradually became deeper and more intense. The eyes they exchanged were filled with unspeakable desire, each touch becoming more deliberate, more prolonged. When Michael leaned in to kiss her, it wasn't a tentative move. It was a bold declaration. Jessica responded enthusiastically, the spark that had erupted between them instantly turning into a prairie fire. The outside world seems to cease to exist and they get lost in each other's passion. The night became an orgy of intentionality, every touch setting Jessica's nerve endings ablaze, every sensation sharpened by forbidden excitement. Michael is the antithesis of William. He's passionate and adventurous with a hint of danger. With him, there were no expectations, no responsibilities, just pure, unadulterated desire. Jessica allowed herself to become fully immersed, her body responding most instinctively to every touch, every whisper, as if she had been starved of such attention for far too long. They moved from the couch to the bedroom, discarding clothing and the last of their concerns along the way. In the faint light of the city, in the tangle of sheets, they found each other, and it was as if the world was left in the present moment. Afterward, as they lay side by side on the bed, still breathing heavily, Jessica felt a complex of emotions welling up inside her. Satisfaction, sure, but more than that, a vague uneasiness. She tries to convince herself that this is just a brief escape, that she can tuck the experience away in the corner of her memory and go on with her and William's life as if nothing ever happened. But deep down, she knew it was impossible. A line has been broken and the boundaries have been blurred. Jessica tried to convince herself that this was just an emotional outburst and that she could walk away in one piece. But as she looked at Michael beside her, still reeling from the passion she had just felt, she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. For the moment, she chose to stay in the moment, reveling in this brief moment of freedom and pleasure. Tomorrow could wait. Tonight she was someone else, someone who lived in the moment and was reckless. The night passed with passion and laughter. Time seemed to melt together and the world outside seemed to disappear. It wasn't until midnight that Jessica remembered to check her cell phone. She reached for the nightstand, her fingers touching the cold screen. When she saw the reminders, an icy fear instantly gripped her heart. William called with several missed calls. Her heart began to race, a million thoughts tumbling through her mind, and it all came crashing down when she opened the first text message. "You're good for each other. Enjoy yourselves." Jessica read the text message with a shudder. "By the way, you're homeless now. I'm going to sleep with your sister." Her hand could barely hold the phone as the words began to blur before her eyes. When she opened the next message, she saw a photo. Their wedding rings casually tossed in the trash, a grim image that symbolized that everything she once had was in tatters. A wave of nausea suddenly came over Jessica, and she felt like the whole world was spinning. How did he find out? What the hell did he do? And what did he mean about sleeping with her sister? These questions raged through her mind like a storm, each one more terrifying than the previous. Michael moved beside her and said something vaguely, but Jessica couldn't hear it anymore. She had to leave, had to figure out what was going on. She frantically picked up the scattered clothing from the floor, moving with an urgency that bordered on frenzy. When she put on the dress that William had picked out for her, what she saw in the mirror was an unfamiliar woman, messy, panicked, and a far cry from the expectant woman she'd been just a few hours before. "Jessica, what's wrong?" Michael sat up, sleepy with confusion. I have to go," she stammered, her brain no longer able to organize a full explanation. Michael frowned, clearly sensing that something was wrong, but Jessica didn't give him a chance to press the issue. She grabbed her handbag and cell phone and rushed out the door almost as if she were fleeing, the sound of the door slamming heavily behind her echoing in the silent hallway. The night air was bone-chillingly cool, but Jessica could barely feel it. Her car was parked a few blocks away, a distance that now seemed extraordinarily long. Each step seemed to be stepped on cotton, and the thoughts were more chaotic than the city's traffic. What exactly did William do? What does that mean? And the scariest part was the word homeless. Did she have a home to go back to? When she finally found her car, her hands were so shaky she could barely insert the key. Sitting in the driver's seat, Jessica tried to calm her rapid breathing, but the panic inside grew stronger. The drive home seems like it's never-ending, although in reality it may only be 20 minutes. The only sound on the empty street was her heartbeat booming in her ears. When she finally turned into her driveway, the sight in front of her made her heart almost stop beating. The house is immersed in an eerie darkness and William's car is nowhere to be seen. This formerly cozy home now looked like a huge dark shadow that gave off a disturbing aura. Maybe he's just out for a break, Jessica tries to convince herself. Maybe he just needs time to calm down. But a deep-seated fear tells her things are far from simple. She hesitated in front of the keyhole for a long moment, her trembling fingers struggling to find the right spot. The door opened with a muffled creak, and she stepped into a deadly darkness. Jessica reaches for the light switch, but nothing happens. The electricity has been cut off. By the moonlight that filtered in through the window, she began to realize how horrifying the sight before her was. Her foot tripped on something and she almost fell. Bending down, she realized it was a broken picture frame, shards of glass strewn across the hardwood floor. She picked up the frame and, in the low light, saw that it was their wedding picture, the crack in the glass just separating their smiling faces. Her heart felt like it was gripped hard by something, and the broken frame seemed to foreshadow the consequences of the mistake she had made. As she continued on through the house, the extent of William's anger became apparent. Furniture fell to the east, cushions were ripped open, and stuffing oozed out like guts. Books and papers were strewn everywhere, and what was once a cozy and tidy home became a mess. It's a battlefield, and Jessica feels like she's the only victim in this war. But it was the walls that shocked her the most. Walls that were once filled with photos and artwork are now canvases of anger. Spray-painted words screamed from every corner. Liar, betrayer, bitch. Each word was like a knife, stabbing deep into her heart. Her breathing became rapid as she stumbled through the rubble, each step making her more aware of what she had lost. The kitchen was a scene of disaster. The cupboard was wide open, its contents falling to pieces. The refrigerator door was half open and the food was beginning to spoil and give off an unpleasant odor. The table where they had shared countless meals was overturned and its legs broken. In the living room, the couch where they used to snuggle and watch movies was cut to pieces. The TV fell to pieces, and even the fireplace wasn't spared, scattering ashes everywhere from the last fire. The true depth of William's vengeance is fully revealed to her when she finally enters the bedroom. Their beds were torn to pieces, mattresses slumped against the wall as if they had been tossed aside in anger. Where their bed had once been lay a lone envelope, standing out in the empty room. Jessica's hands were shaking as she tore open the envelope and drew out the paper inside. William's familiar handwriting came into view. "I hope it was worth it." The words were like a dagger, driven hard into her heart. She read on, "Everything we built together is over. Don't even think about looking for me. By the time you read this, I'll be far away. Enjoy your new life. And by the way, say hi to your sister for me." The letterhead slipped from between her feeble fingers and fluttered to the floor. Jessica's legs couldn't hold her up any longer, and she sat down on the floor, tears blurring her vision. She never imagined William could be so horrible. The man she took for granted, the man she cheated and betrayed, destroying her entire world in the cruelest way possible. She looked around, her breathing becoming rapid and broken. Everything she knew, everything she thought was safe and certain, had been wiped out overnight. William swept through their shared life like a hurricane, leaving nothing but a mess. The realization that this was all of her own making was a knowledge that was almost too much for her to bear. Sobbing echoed through the empty house as Jessica curled up on the cold floor, crying out in pain for all she had lost. Her life is in tatters, and she knows that no one can be held responsible for it, except herself. That adventure that had made her heart beat faster just a few hours ago now seemed so foolish, so unworthy. But it was too late. The mistake she had made was irreversible, leaving her with nothing but devastation and endless regret. In the aftershock of William's brutal revenge, the days that follow are like an ongoing nightmare for Jessica. Panic and despair intertwined, and she could barely sleep, her mind replaying the disaster over and over again. Every morning she woke up expecting it was all just a horrible dream, but the shattered home was a relentless reminder that this was the reality she had created with her own hands. She frantically tries to contact William, but each attempt makes her more desperate. His phone number has been deactivated, and his social media accounts seem to have evaporated as if he never existed. She contacted his friends, coworkers, and even his closest family members, but received either a cold response or a deliberate avoidance. No one knows where William is, or if they do, they won't tell her. In every call, Jessica could feel the undisguised contempt in the other person's tone, a clear indication that her betrayal was no longer a secret, but had spread like wildfire throughout their social circle. Everyone who knew her learned how she betrayed the man who loved her so much. The real blow came when she tried to check her bank account. At that moment, she finally understood the full extent of William's revenge plan. The account had been emptied and not a penny was left. In rummaging through the papers, she discovers an even more horrifying truth. William had transferred ownership of the house into his name weeks earlier and then sold it without her knowledge. This revelation was like a hammer blow that crushed even Jessica's last hope. She's left with nothing. No money, no house, and nothing to fight back with. The weight of reality almost crushed her, and she became a true homeless person. The shame followed her like a shadow that lingered wherever she went. She felt like everyone around her was looking at her, as if the whole world knew of her betrayal. Her once well-organized life was now in pieces, flowing through her fingers, and all she could do was watch. Over time, Jessica gradually pieces together the full picture of William's revenge plan. He'd been suspicious for a long time, secretly watching her every move, noting her increasingly frequent overtime and the growing distance between them. In the end, he even hires a private investigator to follow her and gather enough evidence to confirm his deepest fears. Knowing that William had planned this so carefully sent a chill down Jessica's spine. The man she'd always found predictable, the husband she'd thought would always be gentle and dependable, had sliced her life to pieces with the most precise scalpel-like strokes. She had underestimated him and was now paying for it. But the final blow was yet to come. A few weeks later, a plain white envelope appeared in her mailbox. At first, Jessica thought it was another bill, another reminder of her current predicament. But when she opened it, her blood almost curdled. It was an invitation, simple and elegant, but with deadly force. The invitation was from her sister Sophia, inviting her to a wedding. The groom's name reads, William. Jessica stared at the invitation, her hand shaking so much she could barely hold it. She read the words on it over and over again, hoping it was her eyes glazing over. But the name was there, heartbreakingly clear. William, her husband, or ex-husband, is about to marry her own sister. She slumped in her chair, her vision blurred by tears. She knew William had talked about sleeping with her sister, but she never thought he'd go this far. It was not only a complete destruction of her marriage, but a brutal blow to her entire family. He finds the perfect revenge, not only destroying her present, but changing her family relationships forever. Over the next few days, Jessica tries to find some sort of comeback, trying to salvage some part of her life. She consults an attorney, but the divorce papers that are subsequently served make it clear to her that William has blocked all avenues of retreat. He handled it thoroughly and made sure she got nothing. When she tries to contact him, pleading for forgiveness and praying for an ounce of mercy, all she gets is a cold response from his attorney. The divorce is finalized and there will be no reconciliation. Jessica's once familiar world is gone, replaced by a cold, unforgiving reality. And now that the wedding date is approaching, she has to face this final humiliation. The time after the divorce was like a torture with no end in sight for Jessica. Her life has been turned upside down, moving from an upscale residential neighborhood into a small, cramped apartment on the outskirts of town. The walls of the place were thin as paper, the furniture was worn out, and loneliness haunted her like a ghost day and night. In order to maintain the basics, Jessica starts working her ass off. She takes on extra work shifts and solicits a variety of freelance projects. This almost self-mutilating pace of work was an ordeal, but at least it paralyzed her thoughts and made her forget her situation for a while. With Michael, the forbidden love that once made her heart race quickly loses its appeal after the thrill of the secret is lost. Without the thrill of cheating, their connection becomes hollow and boring. Michael gradually stopped contacting him, and Jessica didn't reach out to him. She finally realized that their relationship was built on lies and betrayal, and when that foundation crumbled, nothing would be left. William and Sophia's world, on the other hand, seems to be in full bloom. Social media has become a double-edged sword, and every refresh is like a knife in Jessica's heart. She couldn't help but look through their updates, and every picture hurt her. They've traveled to exotic places, bought new houses, and their smiles are so real and bright. The smile on William's face was more genuine than she could ever remember, a stark contrast to the icy expression on his face when she last saw him. When Sophia announces the news of her pregnancy, Jessica feels like her world is falling apart again. The life that should have been hers, the happiness she once had but abandoned, now belonged entirely to her sister. Watching William tenderly caress Sophia's bulging belly in the photo, the sense of loss almost crushed her. The weight of life weighs Jessica down to the point where she can barely breathe. She has very little savings left, and the rent on her apartment is rising. The little luxuries that were once taken for granted, a good cup of coffee, a fine dinner, have become unattainable dreams. She began to learn to live a completely different life, counting every penny and weighing every expense. Late at night, when she lay alone in that narrow bed, the remorse would become extraordinarily strong. She would think of the night that changed everything and how easily she had given up on 26 years of marriage. The excitement and thrill of that time seems so ridiculous and unworthy now. If she could do it all over again, would she make a different choice? But that question will never be answered. To add to her pain, she lost more than just a marriage. She lost a home, a sister, and all the relationships she cherished. Those who had been friends had either alienated her or cut off contact altogether. In their eyes, she became that betrayer, that untrustworthy person. Jessica tries to start dating again, but every attempt ends in failure. She realized she couldn't trust anyone anymore, and she couldn't let anyone really get inside her head. That betrayal not only destroyed her past, It also destroyed her ability to have new relationships. She began to understand that some mistakes cost more than just the pain of the moment, but can change a person's soul forever. On social media, she sees William and Sophia getting on with their lives. Their marriage looks so perfect and their smiles are so real. William seems to have found true happiness, and that knowledge is more agonizing than any punishment. His revenge was not just destroying her life, but doing the best he could with a happy new life. Time passes and Jessica gradually learns to live with these hurts. But that deep regret, that remorse for one's behavior, never goes away. She understands that her choices not only destroyed a marriage, but forever changed the course of the lives of all involved. The lesson came too late and was too costly. Today, Jessica still wakes up late at night, remembering the night that changed everything. She would think of the dress William had bought her, of the last breakfast they had shared, of the gentle smile on his face. These memories felt like they came from another world, a world she had destroyed with her own hands. And now she is left to go on with her life, in remorse and loneliness, forever carrying the consequences of her choices. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.